Welcome to another episode in the Reading Through the Gospel series. This is a 20-week Bible study video series focused on the story of Jesus Christ in the Gospel of Mark. Last week we had Mark chapter 11. Jesus entered into Jerusalem, cleansed the temple of all the salespeople and the merchants, and started to develop a conflict with the chief priests and the scribes in the temple area. And this week, chapter 12, it's going to be a lot of that back and forth, developing that conflict with the chief priests. A number of kind of short teaching moments and back and forth moments in this chapter. And we start with the parable of the tenants. Jesus teaches this parable. He talks about a man builds a vineyard and he leaves that vineyard to a number of tenants to work the vineyard while the man is away. And while the man is away, he continues to send servants to go check on the vineyard, how it's doing, to bring back some produce. And every time he sends a servant, the tenants beat up and kill the servant that is sent. One by one, this keeps happening over and over until the man sends his beloved son. The man believes that the tenants won't do the same thing to his son because it's the beloved of the master, the person who owns the vineyard. But even the beloved son, the tenants kill when he's sent. And Jesus uses this as a metaphor for God sending his son, continually sending people and finally sending his beloved son, that surely they won't reject or kill the beloved son, but that's exactly what is happening to Jesus Christ, the cornerstone that the builders reject, the beloved son that the tenants reject and ultimately kill. Next, we have two different moments where the scribes, the Pharisees, the chief priests are trying to trap Jesus by asking him some tricky questions. The first of which is, should we have to pay taxes to Caesar or not? The reason why this is kind of a trap question is because if he says yes, we should have to pay taxes to Caesar, then the crowd would probably be angry because they don't want to have to pay taxes to Caesar. If he says no, they shouldn't have to pay taxes to Caesar, appeases the crowd, but he presents himself as disobedient, which would provide grounds for being disobedient to the government and all that stuff. But Jesus gives a clever and clear response to this question by looking at the coin, saying whose image is on this coin, whose inscription is on this. It is Caesar's. And Jesus says, well then, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. Clear, clever, does not get trapped by the answer. A second attempt to trap Jesus with a tricky question comes in the form of this. They ask Jesus that Moses in the law teaches that if someone's brother dies leaving a wife but no child, his brother must take the wife and raise up descendants for his brother. And they provide the scenario in which 7 consecutive brothers die and keep taking each other's place so that 7 different brothers have this one same wife. And then they asked, when they get to heaven, who of the brothers belongs to this wife? Which one is the husband in heaven? And Jesus responds by saying that in heaven, there isn't earthly marriage. Now, this is a moment in the scriptures and the gospel and the teaching of Jesus that we kind of have to stop and dissect for a moment, because it makes you question, wait, if there is no marriage in heaven, why is there marriage on earth? And what is the significance of this? And it's kind of a 3-step answer here. So first, every one of us, man and woman, is ultimately created for relationship with God, right? So in marriage, it is not necessarily a horizontal union, and the main focus is not for one and the other going towards each other, but one and the other together going towards God. And marriage is beautiful in that it is the two united in their pursuit of a relationship with God. of course, still a relationship with each other, which is beautiful. And marriage, the second part to this, is that marriage is an image of that relationship with God that we are striving for. It is a beautiful and profound marital union, a beautiful and profound love that presents an image of this ultimate relationship with God that we are destined for. And then part 3 is that in heaven, the reality of that relationship with God, what heaven is achieving and accomplishing and coming to this relationship with God that we are destined for. So in heaven, the reality is greater than the image. So this earthly marriage, which is an image of the reality of the relationship with God, in heaven, once that reality is accomplished, it supersedes or is greater than the image of earthly marriage. So it is no longer needed. There's the explanation. Hope it makes sense. Moving on. The next part here is not necessarily so much of like a trapping question, but it says, one of the scribes came forward and heard them disputing, saw how well he had answered them, and asks this question. So it seems less of a trap attempt, but more of just an interest to hear what Jesus has to say about the question. He asks him, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus responds with kind of 2. He says, the greatest is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. This is the greatest commandment. And this is important for us because, one, it still remains true for us today. In our life, the greatest thing for us to follow and the greatest directive for us is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And in making decisions in everything that we say and we do, that is the biggest question. Am I, in saying or doing this thing, loving the Lord my God with all my heart, my mind, and my soul, and my strength? And am I loving my neighbor as myself? These are the 2 defining questions for everything that we say and do. It then says here that because Jesus answers the question so well, that no one asks any more questions after this. So they stop trying to trap him, but Jesus continues to teach, and he starts to talk about the concept of the Messiah and talking about the teaching about the Messiah as the son of David, and not necessarily negating it or refuting it or saying that it's wrong, but he references scripture and saying that David referred to the Messiah as Lord. So if that is the case, then how could the Messiah be kind of a lesser son of earthly origin if David referred to the Messiah as Lord with such a great title? Then what that means is that the Messiah, of which that Jesus is likely referring to himself as, but we can't necessarily draw that from what he's saying, I guess, but the Messiah is not only an earthly origin son of David, but something greater of a transcendent origin. Next, another, again, very brief, just kind of teaching here from Jesus. He says, beware of the Pharisees, beware of the scribes who pray these lofty prayers, have these great shows and wearing certain things, having high seats of honor, but then don't really practice what they preach, and they will receive, it says, they will receive a very severe condemnation. Message for us is to practice what we preach, to not pray such lofty prayers and to put on a great show, but to not maybe love our neighbor as ourselves, or to love the Lord your God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, to practice what we preach. And lastly, to wrap up the chapter, there is this moment where Jesus and the 12 are watching people put money in a basket. And the rich people put in large amounts of money, and a poor woman comes up and puts in 2 small coins. Very small amount of money, so it's clear that rich people putting in a lot more money than the poor woman did. However, Jesus points this out to the apostles and says, the woman put in so much more than the rich people did. And the reason is that the rich people gave of their excess, and the poor woman gave of all she had. If you think about it, a poor person doesn't have much to give. They might not have anything to give. So if a poor woman comes and gives anything, it's giving all that she has. Whereas a rich person has so much to give, has so much excess that they have money that they might not even know what to do with. So if a rich person gives, how much are they really giving then? How much are you giving if you are only giving of your excess? The message for us being, whether it's monetarily, whether it is our time, our talent, don't just give of your excess, because then how much are you really giving? But to give of all that we have, a genuine gift of ourselves. Lots of little moments of teaching here in this chapter, so a lot to take away from it. Lots of just mini teachings, mini points, different things to draw from it. So hopefully you got something from it, because that is it for chapter 12 for this week. Only a few chapters left. We are moving towards the climax point in the story of Jesus, and that will continue as we go forward in these next few chapters and next few weeks. Hopefully you'll continue watching if you're enjoying them. Leave a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments down below. That was Mark chapter 12. Hopefully I'll see you back here next week for Mark chapter 13.